can you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the camera here?
Oh, I'd be happy to. My name is Ben Wiebrocht. It's my first year teaching at Valley Christian. I graduated with my PhD in English Literature from Stanford in 2015.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Midsummer Night's Dream. When did you first read the play?
I think that was in a Shakespeare class in college.
Mm.
So that would have been in 2007.
Did you enjoy reading it?
I did, and even enjoyed more watching it performed. First saw Shakespeare performed in Hyde Park in England.
Cool. Did you ever, were you ever a part of the play, or, did you just, watch?
And no, I've never performed in Midsummer Night's Dream. I just watched it, and the setting was perfect for the play. We watched it on a grassy slope, so, yeah, sitting there while the fairies came skipping down by me onto the stage it was picture perfect.
Mm. What did you first think of it?
Of Midsummer Night's Dream?
Yeah. Was it good, bad, or did you think anything about the elements or anything, or did you just think it was good?
Well, I've always enjoyed the play.
Overall?
Yeah, I've always found it to be a kind of perfect comedy. It combines actual humor with conflict and resolves that conflict, which is what I think every comedy ought to do. In Midsummer Night's Dream, too, even though the comic tone kind of prevents us from ever taking any one threat especially seriously, the play does edge close to tragedy at different points, with Demetrius and Lysander heading off to a duel determined to kill each other over Helena. So that, too, I think, is one of the defining features of a tragedy, is a willingness to come close to one of the defining features of a comedy, a willingness to come close to tragedy before eventually figuring out some way to resolve the problem, which has kind of led us to the brink of that tragedy.
Cool. Do you think Shakespeare was trying to teach us anything we can use in real life, like any practical uses, or teach us a message or a lesson or something? Or was it purely for entertainment, or somewhere in between?
I do not think that necessarily either of those things is true. I don't think that Shakespeare was a didactic author interested in imparting some moral message through his plays. Neither do I think that Shakespeare was in it for the business of entertaining us. I think in Midsummer Night's Dream, like in all of Shakespeare's plays, he's telling a compelling story. And I think what makes a story compelling is the freedom as a member of the audience to respond to it in a variety of ways, which isn't to say that everything is completely up to interpretation. That would be to overstate the point. It's to point out that what a good storyteller does, in my opinion, is stage interesting conflicts, not hold correct opinions. So no, I don't think that Shakespeare finally is articulating any moral in A Midsummer Night's Dream, but I do think that the play can still teach us a lot about love, about marriage, and maybe a little bit too about the lack of control that human beings actually have over their lives.
Well, what do you think Shakespeare was trying to tell us about love in the story?
Yeah, well, for one, that while love is fierce and powerful, irresistible oftentimes, that it's also fickle. And those two things can seem to be contradictory, which is where part of the humor of the play comes from. Lysander and Demetrius love both Hermia and Helena at different points with equal intensity. So yeah, you get the impression in the course of the play that that love is a force that drives human beings, and not a state of being over which human beings have any significant control. No one can decide who they fall in love with, And in Shakespeare's world, at least, in the world of this play, no one can really be trusted to control their actions once they have fallen in love. See, Brandon?
So Puck, right? He's the fairy who puts like the potions in the Athenian lover's eyes. What do you think he represents? Do you think he's an element of randomness, of like love in the story, like craziness?
Yeah, he certainly is a force for disruption. But I don't know that we want to call him necessarily. Yes, to some extent, fairies generally in Shakespeare's world were seen as little agents of disorder. They were kind of associated with a kind of prankish disposition. They'd cause mischief, and so yeah, fairies were not entirely safe, nor did they operate according to the same rules as human beings. They were constantly playing. In Midsummer Night's Dream, the kind of the regular state of affairs for a fairy community is to be dancing or gamboling or engaging in some other kind of amusement, not working or administrating or the kinds of things that good, diligent human beings living in Athens might be doing. So Puck is an agent of randomness to some extent. He's also an agent of fun, of liberation. Things that the citizens of Athens, especially in the beginning of the play, don't have a lot of access to. Hermia and Lysander can't have the relationship that they want within the confines of Athens. They can have it out there in the forest. But, of course, Puck is a double-edged sword. He's an agent of one simple way to interpret the play is as two parallel settings, two parallel plots. And so if you're looking for a kind of a literary term, then parallelism might be a key one for this play. We have two parallel couples in Theseus and Hippolyta on the one hand, and Oberon and Titania on the other. King and Queen of Fairyland and the Duke and Duchess of Athens. One of whom represents the principle of order and reason, the other of whom represents just the opposite, in part because Theseus and Hippolyta are engaged. They're on the verge of marriage. They're two characters who are converging, and their union is going to represent stability, whereas Titania and Oberon are two, they're drifting away from each other, and the result is confusion, disorder. We learn that the rupture between Oberon and Titania is actually responsible for the bad weather in Athens at the time. So I think Shakespeare is interested in using both of those settings, the forest on the one hand, Athens on the other, those two couples, Oberon and Titania on the one hand, Theseus and Hippolyta on the other, to exaggerate the features of each by contrast. Eventually get them into hot water. Yeah, and then with Puck mixed in there as well, as you suggested, often as an agent of randomness to kind of derail sometimes the different characters. That's what gives us a lively and dynamic story, I think.
So, who's your favorite character and why?
Ooh, my favorite character in the play.
Or favorite characters?
That would probably be Bottom the Weaver. Who
The
plays...
craftsman.
What's that?
The craftsman, right?
Right, one of the rude mechanicals, as Shakespeare puts it. who plays the part of Pyramus. One of the things that's great about Shakespeare is he's willing to shine the spotlight of his intellect on such a wide range of characters, not just kings and queens, not just heroes and heroines, but on common people as well. And I think the great thing about that subplot of A Midsummer Night's Dream, you have this group of artisans, middle and lower class, relatively uneducated people, putting on a play, is that it's so wonderfully aspirational. Those characters are doing something artistic. They're not content, Bottom is, to just weave. Bottom doesn't want to weave. Bottom wants to be a hero. He wants to be a tyrant or a lover or something bigger than himself. And yes, Bottom is an ass in every sense of the word, but he's also, I think, extremely endearing. He has ambitions. He has romantic ideas, and I think it's important that of all the mortals in the play, Bottom is the only one to ever see a fairy. The other mortals are, they kind of passively interact with the fairies. They never know that they're actually the objects of the fairies' interest or manipulations, but yeah, they come into contact with the fairies at different points, but only Bottom ever talks with them. Only Bottom ever sees them. And I think it's appropriate, because of every character in the play, Bottom has the biggest imagination. And yes, he's foolish, he's vain, he's a bad actor, a bad writer, all those things, but he does have a gigantic imagination. And I think that's what makes him such a fun character. And leave it to Shakespeare to give us a goofy, lower class worker, the type of figure that important art should have really nothing to do with. And Shakespeare, of course, writes very important art. I leave it to Shakespeare to be the one to make Bottom, one of the most important characters of the play. He speaks a lot of lines. He's the actual beloved of Titania for a while, the fairy queen. And he leads his troupe of actors into battle, performing before the Duke. And another great feature of the play, that like these two realms of society that you would think would be separate, the artisanal class, the virtually illiterate working class, and of course the Duke and Duchess of Athens, the aristocracy, they actually come into contact in the last act of the play. And there's two ways to read that scene. You can read it as just complete farce. We're just supposed to laugh at the actors and how inept they are, or you can approach it in a slightly more generous spirit and recognize that even though they're not getting the play quite right, they don't know how to pronounce words. Their acting is over the top. They break the fourth wall. Just in spite of all of that, they're trying. They're looking to better themselves. They're interested in art, and I think that's cool.
As a last thought, would you recommend this book to students, and if so, what grade or grades? Grade range.
Grade range. I'm all about starting them young. 6th grade.
6th grade?
Sure. I think that students often feel allergic to Shakespearean English and are a little bit resistant to it for that reason. You guys can walk on through. Hey, Haley. But I think the way to get over an allergy, this is true in medicine and often cases, and I think it's true with Shakespeare too, is heavy doses of the thing that you're allergic to. So I think if students are exposed earlier and for longer periods of time to Shakespeare's language, they'll begin to become comfortable with it. It was part of the curriculum in England when children were as young as, the equivalent of our elementary school children. There's no reason why ours can't engage with Shakespeare at that age as well.